Imagine for a moment that nothing existed, not even the concept of time, a total void in which the only presence was that of a mysterious essence, beyond all human comprehension. This is where our exploration begins, at the point of origin, where eternity precedes existence. Today we will dive into the mystery of creation and the possible origin of a creator, a question that has intrigued the brightest minds and the most spiritual souls since the dawn of thought. From the very first moments of this quest, we travel through the ages, exploring the thoughts of ancient philosophers to modern scientific theories. This journey is not limited to science or faith, but ventures into realms where the two meet and sometimes collide. Beyond the questions, we attempt to approach the infinite. Imagine that moment when the universe was an undefinable chaos. According to some sacred accounts, a divine voice commanded, "Let there be light," and the darkness gave way to a new clarity. This first creative act shows us the power of an entity beyond all definition, a force capable of shaping order from nothing. But this leads us to a question that defies human logic. If everything has an origin, what would be the origin of God himself? Perhaps you've heard that the universe has an age, that the world as we know it began at a specific moment. But what about God? Is it possible that he was created, or is he eternal? These questions transcend the boundaries of logic and plunge us into a mystery of unfathomable depth. In search of answers, some have proposed the idea of a divine origin dating back millennia, according to sacred texts. But philosophy introduces a fascinating nuance. If everything has a beginning, does this apply to God? Is it possible that there is an entity that never had a beginning, an entity that simply is? If we accept this, then we must consider that something or someone has existed forever, beyond the physical laws we know. With every answer, new questions arise. Who created the creator? Or how can a spiritual entity interact with the material world? Is it reasonable to believe in a creator without fully understanding his essence? Can faith and science coexist in the face of such a monumental enigma? The greatest scientific theories, like the Big Bang, suggest that the universe did indeed have a beginning, and yet the second law of thermodynamics teaches us that everything is moving toward disintegration, a fact that raises new questions. Observing the stars that fade and galaxies that drift apart, one might deduce that everything is fleeting, that even our universe could not be eternal. So if something must be eternal, it must be something indescribable, beyond our physical reality. This concept goes beyond our understanding, but invites us to reflect. What if our material reality were just a passing manifestation of a greater force? Consider each object around you, a chair, for example. This chair has not always existed, and one day it will disappear. It is the result of a chain of causes and effects. But can we say this of everything? Is there a first cause, an origin that is not contingent but necessary? In religious traditions, God is often described as eternal, an entity without beginning or end, a self-existent being. But this raises an intriguing question. How can we truly understand what being eternal means? Human logic drives us to seek an origin for everything, yet this concept of eternity eludes us. To accept that God has no cause is to accept the existence of a reality beyond what our limited reason can grasp. Indeed, the question, "Who created God?" seems to lose its meaning when we adopt this perspective. It may be wiser to ask whether everything necessarily has a cause. In the realm of science, certain realities, like mathematical laws, exist without an explanation of their origin. In the same way, the idea of an eternal God could mean an existence that justifies itself, a first principle that transcends all causality. For many, this idea is difficult to accept. How can one conceive of something that exists by itself? Yet ancient Greek philosophers and religious thinkers from various traditions have long explored these mysteries. In the Gospel of John, for example, the idea of the Word as the eternal principle at the beginning of everything is a poetic way of describing this eternal presence. The physicist and the theologian also question the fundamental mysteries of existence. What is consciousness? What is energy? Despite our ability to measure them, their true nature remains a mystery. In a discussion among scientists, some have admitted that while energy can be measured, its true nature remains elusive. This reminds us that it is possible to believe in something without fully understanding its essence, such as consciousness or gravity. The question of whether God has an origin ultimately leads us to transcend our own intellectual limits. The idea of an eternal being exceeds our human logic, which is based on concepts of cause and effect. The physicist Daniel Dennett, for example, points out that some mathematical objects, like numbers, do not need a cause because they were never created. Perhaps the same applies to an eternal being. God, from this perspective, would be a reality that does not need an external cause to exist, a necessary existence. This leads us to a philosophical and spiritual conclusion. In seeking to understand the origin of God, we are applying an ill-suited logic. It is like asking, what is the sound of silence? Or, what is the color of emptiness? The question loses its meaning because it is based on concepts that do not apply to an eternal reality. In conclusion, this reflection on the origin of the Creator is an invitation to expand our understanding. In attempting to answer this question, we may not find a definitive answer, but we uncover something essential: the humility of our minds in the face of the infinite. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not where God comes from, but why we, as human beings, are fascinated by this question. Thus, the origin of God remains a mystery, but it is precisely this quest, this desire to know, that enriches our minds and drives us to go beyond our limits.